I'm Mac. What's up, everyone? Welcome back. Season 3, Episode 5. I feel like I'm aging by the decade every episode, so this is insane. Welcome back. For those that are new around here, my name's Mackenzie. This is the Save the Best for Last podcast. And every episode looks very different than the one prior and the one following. And today's episode is going to be one of my favorite conversations around navigating your 20s. So, again, if you're new around here, thanks for joining us. I appreciate anyone and everyone that takes time out of their life to listen to me yap. And if you're back, well, welcome back. Happy to have you here. So, without further ado, let's talk about navigating your 20s. I want to be very clear. Even if you're not in your 20s yet, or you've far surpassed your 20s, I still find this a very interesting episode to listen to, and I find a lot of my episodes integrate into one another very well. And I've talked a lot about change, and I think the whole concept of my podcast is change. I mean, for those that have been around since day one, the entire concept of this podcast has flipped upside down. And that's kind of what today's about. I want to tell a little bit about my story as far as change, and then talk about what that looks like moving forward. What inspired this conversation is recently I was on TikTok, shocker, and I was watching this episode, or this TikTok, I should say, for quite some time about this guy. Sorry, quick yawn. Who I think was turning 29, like it was his last year in his 20s. And he was telling himself what he wished he could have told himself in his early 20s. And he goes on to say the moral of his story was it's okay to change what you want and what you want to do. And that's kind of what today's about. I went to college for special education. And anyone that knows me knows I am not a special educator in the slightest. And there's days where I think maybe I should be. And there's days where I think, oh, I really shouldn't be. And I think when you're in your 20s, specifically your young 20s, you're still developing and really coming to understand what it is that you want and what you like and what you want to pursue. And I found that socially, the norm is to have a plan. You graduate high school, you go to college, you get a job, you go to college, you get higher education after undergrad, you get even higher education. And again, essentially, the moral of that story is you go to college and you get a job. And it's almost socially unacceptable to not have a plan, or to change the plan, or to just not have one clear path. And it's kind of frustrating to me because I don't think that's how it should be. And to further dissect that, I've recently been in communication with someone that is a very clear stereotype of what exactly I just explained. Goes to high school, graduates, goes to college, graduates, get higher education, graduates, gets the job that he wanted from the jump, and that's what he does. Like, he's very consistent, very himself, has always had a sense of direction. And I admire that. I truly do. And I don't want this episode to discredit or discourage or have people that are wired like that contemplating. That's never my agenda. However, I just want everyone that's listening to have an open mind to all avenues and routes. I almost called this podcast The Path Less Traveled instead of Save the Best for Last. I love the name of it. I'd never change it. People have given me all sorts of different names. They're like, oh, you should have named it this. Oh, you should have named it that. Oh, I'm yawning like crazy. Every time I record an episode, it's like all the yawns come out. But I'm content with the name of this podcast. But the reason why I was convinced for quite some time that The Path Less Traveled would be the name is because that really defines my journey. I've had a very path less traveled journey, and nothing's been direct, high, low, side street, side quest, up, down, back around. And that's always worked in my benefit. And I think it's hard when you're in it to feel that way. For example, right now, as I referred to the person I was just talking about, being around that individual, it makes me think like, oh, wow, like this individual is very squared away, knows what they want, and it's very attractive, impressive, the whole nine. But it also makes me reflect on myself and my journey and how things have played out for me, and how that in and of itself is also attractive, impressive, unique. So I think the whole point of this episode, and I hope is everyone's takeaway, is that it's okay to have a different journey than the person next to you. And it's okay to want to take the path less traveled. And it's okay to do something and then decide, you know what? I don't want to fucking do this anymore. This isn't fun to me anymore. This isn't cool to me anymore. I'm done with this. That's okay. But what's not okay is that people in this world make other people in this world feel like doing things that are considered abnormal aren't okay. But it's okay to start over. And even like outside of your 20s, at 75, it's okay to start over. But again, I feel like unfortunately that's just not systematically the MO, especially in America and in a lot of other countries too, for that fact. But anyway, I'm going to kind of dissect my journey and just speak to how nothing's really ever gone to plan. I grew up playing the highest level of soccer pretty much out there. And it's funny, I always speak about it like it's my dead dog or something, which is terrible. But God, what a time to be alive, you know? And my whole life from 5 until 15, that was my future. That was everything. That's what I was going to do. I was going to go to college and play soccer. I was going to play professional soccer. That was just what I was destined to do. And I was always told that. And I want to reiterate what I just said. I was always told that. And I think that's the problem. I think for so many of us, we're always told, you should do this, you should do that, you should do this. And we're a product of our environment, right? I think a lot of people end up becoming or doing things because of where they're from, how they were raised, and what they were told they should do. And it's a double-edged sword for me because I've always been the troublesome child and made a lot of mistakes and done a lot of crazy shit throughout my life. But at the end of the day, I'm very grateful that I always gave pushback and I didn't do what I was told I should do. You know, so it started with soccer, and I would travel all over the country, you know, even internationally, and be told, like, this is your calling. This is what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And that kind of pressure, especially as a young girl, we're talking, these conversations started when I was 9. I'll never forget certain cinematic like experiences that have transpired in my life that live in my head rent free. My first national level coach was a Brazilian guy. His name is Paulo. One day, it's my dream to reconnect with Paulo and have him on this podcast. Maybe that would be insane. But Paulo was a men's Brazilian national player, and God, what a talented soul, but very intense soul. And as a 10, 11-year-old who's training under someone that has won a World Cup, it's a different experience, and it's a different level of intensity. And I'll never forget, I was playing when I was like 8, 9, 10-ish, I was playing for a good team, but not the best team where I was from. And Ohio's pretty damn known for soccer and producing people at a high level that play soccer. And I played for a good team, but there was one team in my area that was the best team. And it was getting to the point where I was becoming the big fish in a small pond on that smaller team. And finally, parents and other people were speaking to my mom and influencing her, she needs to try out for this bigger team. Again, back to the conversation of this is what you should do. And it's interesting the effect that those around you can have. But back to the story. I go to this tryout. And again, I was 10, 11 years old at this point in time. And side note, anyone that knows me well knows that in life, where I shine the most is in any high pressure situation, which is why the career I have now, I find myself shining the most in high pressure situations, high volume environments, high traffic moments, when everything's on the line. That's when I'm my best, which is weird because for a lot of people, that's when they crack. But I've never been that way. With every tryout, interview, exam, test, that's when I just show up and show out. And I'll never forget, I was at this tryout, and no lie, 5 minutes in, this guy pulls me off the field and is like, "Where the fuck are you from?" Genuinely asked me like that. And I was just just staring at him, 4 brain cells deep. And he was like, "You need to go find your mom." And again, I couldn't have been playing longer than 10 minutes on that field, but I was clearly dominating. And I don't have a ton of memories from my childhood, but this I'll never forget. I still have that tryout number that you pin to your shirt in my house to this day. And I go running to the car and I'm like, "Mom, Mom, Mom." And she's drinking a beer and reading her book in the trunk of the car. And it's just like, what? The tryout just started. What's going on? And I'm like, "The coach wants to talk to you." And she's like, "Here we fucking go." Probably thinking I'm causing problems, causing trouble, because I was a menace, to say the least. And the coach is like, "We need her. We need her yesterday. Where has she been? Why, where are you from?" Just kind of wanting to know the background story. And as they talk, I'm like, "Well, you guys figure it out. I'm going to keep playing." And I kept playing, and that conversation changed the trajectory of my entire soccer career. And I then was a part of that team, and then I moved up to that team integrated with another team, which became an even higher team, and that team ended up being one of the best teams in the country and probably arguably in the world. And, most of my teammates went on to play Division I soccer, and some play professionally, and it's a beautiful thing to see, but it wasn't the journey that was meant for me, right? But society said, and the parents and the coaches and the teachers said, this is for you. And I've probably given this analogy on every single podcast episode I have, and I'll continue to until I'm dead. But I always talk about people being a product of their environment, and I use the water bottle analogy, and people either love it or they're like, please stop using this fucking analogy. But I find everyone's worth to be dependent on their environment. And it's unfortunate, but it's very true. And some people can break through that and some people can't. And the analogy goes that a water bottle at a grocery store, let's just say a Walmart, is probably about $1 or $2. We'll say $2.50 with inflation these days. But a water bottle at Disney World is probably $15, $20. Let's say with inflation, $25. And that's very telling. And what I mean by telling is that's very telling to my life, your friend's life, the guy that you drive past on the road every day's life. Like, we all have become who we are today because of our environment. And for some of us, we're fortunate for that. For some of us, it's unfortunate. Excuse me. But I digress. So I was told I was supposed to play soccer. Well, when that all kind of blew up in my face, not kind of, literally blew up in my face, it was a very dark time of my life. To the point where two years after soccer was out the window, for numerous reasons, which I've talked about previously on this podcast, so you can go back and find the lore on that, I then really lost it. But again, what does losing it mean? Did I lose it or did I find it? Because quote unquote losing it, meaning getting help mentally, physically, emotionally, and being away from the rest of my peers and the world for a bit of time of my life, at the time, until still to this day, seems hard to grasp and emotionally trying. But at the same time, I recognize if I didn't lose it all, I would have had nothing to find. Right? And now I can sit and look at my life and really recognize that I live a beautiful life. Beautiful life. But it's ever changing, right? So soccer happens, I pivot, I change, I lose my shit mentally, have to spend some time away. That works itself out. I then go to college. I start my career with Louis Vuitton, pivot, change. Like I said, I went to college for special education. And 2 days ago, I was watching this video about this guy that had a child with Down syndrome, and he recently had adopted an additional child with Down syndrome. And it's a long story. It's a really beautiful story. But I started sobbing during the interview because there's still a part of my soul that belongs with that community. And it doesn't mean I can't still partake in that community. You know what I mean? And this goes back to the conversation of some people are meant for one thing and to shine in one thing and be the best at one thing. But some people are meant to be really good at a lot of things. And I would say I align more with the second category. But like I said, my friend that I was speaking of earlier, he's really good at one thing. He's good at a lot of things, don't get me wrong. It's not like these people that are more, I'll say type A, if we want to call it that, even though that's not the PC verbiage. But people that are more of a traditional route, that doesn't mean they don't have other interests, hobbies, likes, or talents. But there are certain personality types that are ever changing and evolving and aren't consistent with their passions and their hobbies. And that's me. And I recognize that. But why is that looked down upon? Right? I don't know if I've ever said this on the podcast, and this is like a trauma statement, but I tell quite a lot of people about this. But again, as I'm referencing my story throughout this episode, I'll never forget after losing soccer and having that 2-year phase of just complete distress. My aunt said at a Thanksgiving, a Christmas, something of that nature, that I'm going to be the cousin that's smoking Marlboro No Filters in my brother's basement for the rest of my life. And I'll never, ever, ever forget that statement until I'm dead in the fucking ground. Because at that point in my life, 100%, a lot of people would have predicted that's how this situation would have transpired. And it's sad. There's still a lot of people in this world that see me as that person, and it's sad, but it is what it is, right? I was also yesterday actually talking to one of my best friends who last year went through one of the most difficult human experiences anyone can go through. And it's crazy to see that a year, how much can change, right? And that's why the moral of this episode is like, you're ever changing, and your 20s are truly a pivotal time to change and find yourself and this, that, and the third. But long story short, we were talking about the situation that she went through that one day I'd love to have her on the podcast, but that's not something I will share at this point in time. But she went through something very difficult, and after going through it, she lost a lot of friends that probably were never friends in the first place. However, she thought they were who were around her for multiple years of her life. And she's truly become a whole different person a year later after getting out of this situation. But she still talks about the fact that those people will always have this certain perception of her. And that's a complicated feeling to have, and I resonate with that quite deeply because, like I said, that chapter from age 15 to 17 was a very dark time in my life, and there's a lot of people out there that have a perception of me that is that forever, right? And if you only knew half of the shit that happened during that time, you'd be like, that's a horrible perception to have. It is. It's terrible. I could sit here and cry about it. To think that people think I'm that girl is sad. But, just like the book says, let them, right? They, unfortunately, don't have the pleasure of learning who you are today. And that was the conversation that I had with her, is let them. In a lot of instances in your life, people are going to have the perceptions and the feelings and the thoughts, and they're going to say things and they're going to do things. And they're going to do it regardless. And you can internalize it and hyperanalyze it and let it ruin you. You can. And I understand why people do. It's awful. It's awful. Or you can let them, So as I go into the 20s era of my life, what a wild time. I start this career as a 19-year-old that's very interesting to navigate at that age, and there was a lot of hardship that came with that, but there was a lot of beautiful moments that came with that as well. And again, I contemplated, is this for me? Is this for me? I then, soon after that job, probably about a year in, started dating someone that I was convinced I was going to marry. And again, throughout that relationship, is this for me? Is this for me? Is this for me? Eventually, I realized it wasn't, and that changed. And after that breakup, I wanted to explore different avenues as far as careers. So I started working more seriously in podcasting and development and writing and all these things. And I realized through that experience that that wasn't meant for me. And it would take hours to dissect all of these situations segment by segment. But I now lead to today, to where I moved across the country and I started an entire new job, an entire new position around people I've never met in a city I've barely been to in my life, and people I don't know and culturally I don't understand, and complete fresh start. And that's okay. And if in 6 months right now I wanted to go to the moon, that's okay. Every single day you have the opportunity to reinvent yourself. And I specifically talk about your 20s because I find that to be, I'm 23 years old, so I can only speak to what I've been through, but I find that to be the most pressurized, anxious, stressful era of life. And from what I've heard, it is. But I've also heard that this is the time to do it and to do whatever your soul is drawn to. I recently was watching a podcast with Kesha. God, I love Kesha. And she recently has been doing, oh gosh, it's not like a form of MMA. It's sensei-like behavior. I can't recall the specifics, but she learned from her sensei that, we'll call it for the episode's sake, that in life you shouldn't do things because of your mind or your heart, but you should do them because of your gut or your soul. And I just will never forget her saying that, which I know that sounds so minuscule and stupid, but I've never resonated more with something in my life. Anytime I've been in a situation where my gut is telling me something is here, positive, negative, anything, it's never been wrong. My mind has been wrong. I've thought I read something a certain way and it was wrong. And my heart sure as fuck has been wrong. But my soul and my gut, not a day in my life. Not a day in my life. And that's just the human anatomy. And that, I am nowhere near a doctor, but to my knowledge, that is an unexplainable science that is real. Our bodies have this way of telling us, hey, this is or this is not meant for you. And unfortunately, a lot of us like to ignore that, right? But follow your soul and take risks, especially in your 20s. If you want to move across the country and start a new job and start a new career, do it. If you want to quit your job and backpack around the world, do it. If you want to start a nonprofit, do it. Like, I hate that we feel limited or we feel stuck, because you can restart any fucking day. Any day. Some people's situations are harder to navigate than others, sure. But the ability to restart, it can happen any day. And for those that are in their 20s, try new things, you know? Another thing to touch on, which has been such a... it's been such a great experience. I have recently joined, a run club. And this run club has been awesome. It's been truly an awesome experience. And I've thought about doing this for a while because I'm a runner. But it's brought me friends. It's brought me experiences. It's brought me physical activity. And that's just one silly little example. But I've always been the type to try things that maybe I shouldn't. And I've done things that have backfired terribly, but I at least learned something from it. And that's why with every situation, we all have. I always tell people I have no regrets, and I don't. I don't regret anything. But we all can say we've experienced things that we wish we hadn't, and there's a lot of people that have had to go through very dark times that none of us would wish on our worst enemy. But it's about obtaining information from those circumstances and then applying them into the future, into what's to come. And that's why taking risks is okay, because what's the worst that can happen? It doesn't work out. Well, then you start again. You have until the end of time to start again. So anyway, I'm going to leave this episode short-ish and sweet. We're at the 30-minute mark. For me, that's short. I've yapped for an hour and a half before. But lately, it's really resonated with me that every single day is an opportunity to reinvent yourself. And I've preached on this before, and I'll preach on this again. But it's because it's true. And if you feel stuck, always know that there's a way out. And there's so many beautiful options in life out there that you have every ability to explore. And every day's a new day to start again. So I appreciate each and every one of you for listening to me yap this beautiful May 31st. And I'm beyond grateful for the community I have and the people that take the time to listen to my truth and listen to the thoughts that live rent-free in my mind. But I hope April showers brought you flowers, and I hope you have a beautiful summer. I will see you at the end of June. Bye now.